presentation. It's a privilege to be here and to discuss how the war in Ukraine, the sanctions and global energy markets are reshaping Europe's downstream sector, and it's happening in ways that have seemed unthinkable only 2 years or 4 years ago. So the central point I want to make tonight is simple but consequential. Energy revenue remains one of the key financial pillars of the Russian war effort in Ukraine. That's a fact. And they cannot continue that war without selling energy, without selling oil, gas, coal, timber, all other stuff that is related with the industrial sector. So Europe's response on this has been to dismantle piece by piece. They are hoping to dismantle piece by piece the commercial system that once allowed Russia, to freely gain foothold in Europe, to freely sell this energy in Europe, to operate across the continent. So, in my remarks, I would like to point that this is not just a story about pipelines or fuel contracts or business as usual. It's about power, influence, and restructuring of the industrial ecosystem in Europe. It is happening actually right now. Refineries, logistics networks, lubricant manufacturing facilities, supply chains, financial flows, all of this once linked Europe and Russia very tightly. But today, we are witnessing a totally different market, totally different way of doing, business, especially for energy products, for buying and selling oil, trading. And Ukrainian leadership recently has framed this reality in stark terms. As President Volodymyr Zelensky mentioned like a week ago, he had a appearance in Kiev University, and he had a talk there. I mean, he spoke about current state of affairs in the war, and he said that Russian energy cannot be separated from its war effort. So I'm quoting now Zelensky. We do not have to choose, he said. Whenever we strike a military target or energy, he, Putin, sells this energy and he sells oil. So he went on to explain that Ukraine considers Russian energy infrastructure a legitimate strategic target because it fits the war machine financially. And as we know, Ukraine has already struck multiple Russian refineries, including Rosneft's Novokuybishevsk and Gazprom Neft's Omsk facilities that are thousands of miles away from the border and deep behind Russian lines. And these effective actions by Kiev and Zelensky's repeated statements that Russian energy infrastructure is a legitimate target, especially as now Russia is wages what Ukrainian officials and what opposition officials, opposition figures describe as energy hold on more. If you heard about the gold on more term, but now what is happening in Ukraine, with Russian destroying infrastructure, energy infrastructure, it's hold on more, freezing to death people, basically. Destroying Ukrainian energy system, while people are freezing. So this reflects a fundamental shift in how energy is viewed in modern conflict. It's no longer treated as merely as an economic asset. It's understood as a strategic enabler of military power and part of Russia's hybrid war against the West. So Ukraine actions against Russian infrastructure, they are very effective, and they disrupted Russian domestic fuel supply, and we experienced, observers experienced high fuel prices in Russia, which are unusual high, and they never been so higher as before, as it is now. So to understand why this matters so much, we have to recall how deeply Europe was actually connected with Russian energy before. the invasion. We know that for decades, Russia was main supplier, the biggest supplier of Russian energy. How high are the prices? Let me just, I will continue with this, and then you guys can just, yeah, I will get your questions. Yeah. So, as I said, Russian energy was like 45% of the Russian gas. It was like 45% of the whole demand that Europe was getting from imports. That was 45% was Russian gas, and around 27% was imports of oil. So entire economies, particularly in Central and Eastern Europe, were structurally tied to the Russian supply through geography, pipeline infrastructure, refinery configurations that were, refinery technology that is designed to process Urals, the Urals brand, because Urals is much more higher viscosity, higher thick oil, thicker oil. So not every refinery can process that kind of oil, but many of these refineries in Central and Eastern Europe, as well as those in Central Asian countries like Azerbaijan, Caucasian, Azerbaijan, and Uzbekistan, they all have similar technology to process that kind of oil. So this dependence began to crumble after February 2022, and this happened within a remarkable short period. Russian gas imports dropped to roughly 13% of EU consumption, while Russian oil imports fell to below 3%. So this shift came at a high price, with energy costs, high price for Europe, with energy costs rising sharply, and governments in Europe forced to intervene to stabilize the markets. But European governments and NATO and European capitals, their strategic direction is clear. They prefer security. They are preparing for war with Russia right now, and the diversification began to outweigh cost efficiency. So they don't want to see that they do the business and they do the business as usual, but they are more concerned about their security, about efficiency, and lowering the prices of energy as much as possible. So sanctions against Russia accelerated this transformation. The impact of the sanctions were gradual and not much instantaneous. I mean, they were introduced in successive waves. First, we had financial restrictions. If you remember, the Russian banks were cut off from the SWIFT system of payments. Then we had the technology bans, oil price caps that were at a certain level, like 55. I guess it was like $55 per barrel price caps that any other buyers cannot buy Russian oil more than 50, if it costs more than 55 per gallon, or other way would face sanctions. And then there were shipping and insurance limits. So they were all of these measures were tightening the operational space for Russian companies. We are seeing now Lukoil and Rosneft as the main suppliers, one of the biggest suppliers of Russian oil, facing these sanctions. But I will speak about this later. So the result has been a system where dependence is reduced, but influence has not vanished entirely. So my point is that on the books we have the sanctions, but the flow of Russian products, Russian refining products, and this is the area that I'm focusing, is still going on in Europe. And I will explain about this. So this is most visible in the downstream sector. This is the sector. This is the thing that I'm focusing on in my reports for the publication that I'm writing. The name of the publication is Loops and Greases, and it's basically a trade publication which focuses more on refining products and specifically on lubricants. Lubricants are the main, how to say, parts that are used for machinery, industrial, or automotive, or any other kind of machinery to work. So these are essential parts of essential parts that without this, any machinery would not work. So that's why it's very important setting niche in the refining industry. Lubricants production, lubricant additives, and base oils. Base oils are the main building blocks for lubricants. For any type of motor oils that you are seeing sold in Walmart or in other grocery stores, big grocery stores like Walmart, they sell also motor oils, and these are made with base oils. And analytics, they are focused on the price of these base oils. They're always changing, depends on the price of crude oil. So I did many stories about these European and Russian companies who are manufacturers of lubricants that were affected by the shifts triggered by the war. This is unfolding in the heart of Europe, we might say. So on the one side, Russian companies they are now retreating from refining, fuel distribution, and lubricants markets across Europe. And on the other side, we have German or French or Dutch companies that have lost foothold that previously, in a previously lucrative Russian market. For example, Shell, they had a huge manufacturing facility in Tver. That's like 100 miles away from Moscow. And I visited that facility, a huge facility for production of Shell lubricants. They lost their facility there. Then Total is a big French oil major. They also had their own facility for production of lubricants. They also lost their assets there. And many German or, how to say, Czech or Dutch companies who were selling refining products in Russia, they also not producing but selling. They also lost the market there. So the new U.S. sanctions that are targeting Rosneft and Lukoil have intensified this process by restricting financing and international operations on a global level, including so-called secondary sanctions that Trump administration threatens all the banks in the West and in China and in Asia, all entities who are facilitating transactions with these companies, with Russian oil majors. So they would go under sanctions if they facilitate the transactions with them. So as a result, Russian oil majors start selling their foreign assets, and they are stepping back from markets that once formed the backbone of their international strategy. For example, Lukoil. Lukoil is a pure example of how a company with a network of different types of businesses like production of lubricants, distribution, they are selling all these assets, network fuel stations around Central and Eastern. Actually, they have more on the Balkans than in Central and Eastern Europe. They are all selling all these assets now, and these stations are also present in Austria. They are also selling their marine oil business in Singapore, and they are even have their own blending facility for lubricants blending in Kazakhstan, which is like Kazakhstan is traditionally viewed as a part of Russia's energy sphere of influence, and they even backing up from there. So analysts estimate that the value of these assets that Lukoil is selling is like $22 billion. so the company has not disclosed financial terms, and NECL requires approval from the U.S. Treasury of Office of Foreign Assets Control, and now the negotiations are ongoing. So it's very interesting fact that one of the interested parties to buy the assets of Lukoil is the Austrian investor Bernd Bergmeier. And he's a figure better known for his previous ownership of the digital entertainment platform Pornhub. So the previous owner of Pornhub is interested in buying Lukoil assets in Europe. And his involvement actually illustrates how politically sensitive assets often attract unconventional investors willing to operate in complex regulatory environments. This is related to the fact that these assets are politically, how to say, marked, constrained. They are kind of risky assets, and that's why they are traded at discounted valuations. So they believe that they would get good assets for much lower price than market value. So as I mentioned, in the Balkans, Lukoil has a big footprint. The company owns Neftochim Burgas refinery in Bulgaria, and this is the biggest one in this area in the Balkans. And this refinery now is under partial state control. And then Lukoil has a refinery in Romania, extensive fuel retail networks across Southeastern Europe. So these are not marginal assets. They shape regional fuel supply and pricing, and at the same time, the other Russian oil manager, Rosneft, it retains exposure to refinery stakes in Europe, in particular in Germany, and also these assets have been placed under state trusteeship since the invasion, effectively stripping Moscow of operational control. So what I wanted to, to make my point that we have all these sanctions going on. We have all these different types of measures against Russian companies, Russian oil sector. But again, we are seeing while Russian companies are retreating from the European market, we are seeing smaller companies rising, smaller companies that have ties with Russian oligarchs or with some individuals of the Russian security services that have money and invest, and suddenly they have feedstock, they have base oils to produce these lubricants and sell them with a discounted price all around Europe. And these companies, I wrote about some of them in my reports. They are flush with smuggled Russian feedstock. So basically, what's going on is in Lithuania, we have Belarus on the other side of the border. We have Naftan. Naftan is a huge Belarusian oil producer, is major Belarusian oil manager, and this refiner is selling, is succeeding to smuggle base oils across the border to Lithuania. So this is happening, and it's, no one can. I mean, it's like an illicit operation done under the radar, or maybe the authorities are registering this, but they are not, how to say, reacting. Maybe we have corruption there. Maybe we have some kind of ties between different Lithuanian authorities and some Lithuanian authorities and this guy Yuri Sudemer, who is related with the Russian security services, and what they are doing is that they are he has a company named SCT Lubricants, and this manufacturer of lubricants is using Russian feedstock and producing finished products, refining products, and ship them into Europe under different commercial brands. And they are using, for example, German brand, Manol, it's a motor oil brand, which is kind of not so popular, but it's known in Germany and around Europe. And they have these networks and investigations about this kind of illicit trading reveal that these networks repeatedly did did money laundering schemes, and this was alerted, and several Scandinavian banks that operate in the Baltics, they raised the alarms, and they were accused that were not acted up earlier to stop these schemes. So this underscores a fundamental weakness in the sanction enforcement, in my opinion. It depends not only on political decision, but also on financial institutions. The traders, the regulators acting in coordination. All of these roles, actors, they have to act in coordination to enforce the sanctions. So very interesting case is the UK market, and market players there approach this problem on a regulatory standpoint. UK has this trade remedy authority, something is similar like anti-monopoly agency. The name is Trade Remedies Authority, and they imposed anti-dumping duties on lubricant imports from Lithuania and United Arab Emirates, because this company from Lithuania, they actually are flooding the UK market with cheap products, cheap refining products like lubricants and coolants, all this stuff that are used for the cars. And players in this market, UK players, they protest and started filed a complaint, and that's why the TRA, the Trade Remedy Authorities, imposed these anti-dumping duties for lubricants imports from Lithuania and the Emirates. And these distortions were tied with complex supply chains involving re-exported base oils, as I mentioned, and an individual named Mark Lord, he's a good friend of mine. He started all this campaign against flooding the market with illicit products, with products that are dumping the prices of the local lubricant producers in the UK. Also, such kind of trends we've seen in the European Union as well, not only in the UK market, in many countries in the European Union. Local producers are complaining that there are lubricant products, refining products sold with much less price, much lower price than the market price, and they believe that because some producers in Europe are using Russian base oil imported via Egypt or Turkey, and allowing them to sell these goods below manufacturing costs. So this is happening everywhere. So we are speaking that we are saying that sanctions are like operating like they are effective, but it's not the case. Russia still succeeds to somehow sell these higher value products, not only crude oil, but higher value products to the European market. Turkey is a clear example how markets respond to this, how markets are adapting to the sanctions. So because it's geographically it's in the middle of all these east-west directions. Turkey, as the largest Black Sea maritime power, and its refineries and trading infrastructure, has become a key hub for Russian crude and base oil, and these are processed and re-exported to Europe. In some cases, this operates in tension with sanction policy and demonstrating how geography and commercial logic can reshape enforcement outcomes. So we've seen that energy flows cannot be stopped. They are rerouting and evolving, and that's likely part of Moscow's strategic calculation, as long as it is unwilling to negotiate the durable peace in Ukraine. So they are hoping on the fact that as long as you are controlling and trying to take measures against energy will find its way, either through such kind of channels to premium price products like lubricants and fuels, or either through with a shadow fleet, tankers shadow fleet that export crude oil in such markets as China and India. So taken together, these developments show that Europe's energy system is no longer defined by a simple east-to-west flow of hydrocarbons. It's becoming a globalized network shaped by sanctions, commercial adaptation, and geopolitical pressure. Russian companies are withdrawing from ownership positions, as we mentioned, but Russian hydrocarbons continue to circulate globally, and Europe is diversifying its supply. But as we mentioned, enforcement gaps still remain. The market is becoming more resilient, but it's becoming more complex in some ways. The key, according to my opinion, is that the energy sovereignty cannot be achieved simply by changing suppliers. It requires control over infrastructure, transparency in financial flows, and coordinated regulation across the markets. I believe the restructuring currently taking place is historic, that it's never been before. So refineries are changing hands or being shut down for technological revamping due to feedstock changes. And as we mentioned before, Urals is not available in Europe now, and these refineries that use high viscosity crude, they are changing their technological, they are modernizing or revamping to accept crude from such places as Norway or Azerbaijan. So supply chains are being redrawn, and the downstream sector, often overlooked in this situation for the sanctions, has become central to geopolitical competition. Energy has moved from being a background economic issue to a central pillar of security policy. And Europe's energy map is being redrawn by war, sanctions, and market forces simultaneously. So the challenge ahead is to ensure that a new system does not recreate all dependencies in a different form. And hopefully war will end soon, and Europe could adopt to the new realities, but the situation as of now is like it is. I mean, the sanctions are not working, and this is my, how to say, not pessimistic, but critical view of the situation. And I believe that until Putin is not stopped with selling not only Russia's crude, but selling Russian higher margin products, the war will still continue. Yeah. That's I'm leaving here on this note, and guys, if you have any questions, I would gladly answer those. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Economic sanctions distort the benefits of economic trade between countries. And Europe, of course, pays the price, as does Russia, because they have to import hydrocarbons and lubricants for somewhere else to pay a higher price than they were paying to Russia. So sanctions as a coercive economic tool of foreign policy rarely have the intended effects. We've had sanctions on Cuba since '59, sanctions on Iran, sanctions on North Korea. Hasn't accomplished any of the objectives. I don't think the sanctions on Russia on hydrocarbons is going to accomplish the objectives either, regardless of how effective you think you can design a system. The question I have is, assuming that the war eventually ends, probably not through a peace settlement, but through an armistice at some point, Russia's going to end up with a big chunk of Ukraine under its domination. The question is, can you, once sanctions are imposed, they're very difficult to roll back. And what do you see as the future? Because at some point, Europe and Russia have to have a healthy trading relationship. They're neighbors. Just like the U.S., we import most of our oil from Mexico and Canada. Excuse me? Yeah, I had the question. The question is, how are you going to roll back sanctions after the war ends and capture the benefits that free trade between Europe and Russia is going to produce? Otherwise, they'll continue selling India, China, and all go to Asia.
Rolling back of sanctions. So, in my opinion, the war, if the war ends, it means that every side has to be satisfied. Ukrainian, Russian, Europe, and Europe as well. So I don't think that these sanctions would be withdrawn until, for example, we don't have responsibility for what is happening now in Ukraine. Until someone is not tried about the genocidal things, that the war crimes. Yes. So the sanction will stay in place until the justice is not satisfied, in my opinion. It won't be opposite. It won't be like you continue business as usual, and we have millions of casualties. We have destroyed Ukraine until Ukraine is not rebuilt, and until Russia doesn't pay the money, the reparations. It means that the sanctions will stay.
As an economist, I'm always, not always, but I was very puzzled by the decision that one of the sanctions should be forcing lower price for Russian oil. Because obviously the oil price the low price makes it even more attractive. So what is your understanding? What was the logic of, I understand that they're trying to reduce the revenue of the Russian state, but at the same time, you have two products that are identical. One is 30% cheaper. Obviously, there was a big incentive for people to buy even more Russian oil and less. So what is your understanding of the logic of this type of sanction? Didn't make sense.
So the only thing about the oil price cap is not if Russia will continue selling the oil with lower price. Yeah, of course they can sell. They have oil crude in abundance, but this if they are if there is a total embargo of oil coming from Russia, then this will disrupt the global market. That's why. So Biden administration, they introduced this cap, and they were afraid. Biden administration was afraid to go bravely and introduce like a total embargo, like Iranian case on Russian oil, because Russia is very connected with the global market, and if this flow stops, it will disrupt them. And we have high prices.
Lower price makes it even more, because all your talk is how the people keep buying Russian oil. And when you make it even cheaper, it's even more incentive for people to buy more. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So on the other side, they are thinking that the thing is that since Russia is gradually selling itself with lower and lower price, it means that its industry will degrade, and its economy will, will flatter, and it means that at a certain point they have to start, they have to go to negotiation table because economy would collapse with selling all the time selling cheap oil and not having technological advancements, not modernizing its refining industry. It means that so the Western powers most likely strategists think that this will gradually ruin the economy. Yeah.
Okay. I was next, and I'll make sure that it gets properly handed off to the next person after me. What I was going to ask was like a two-part question. Clarification of Russian energy and oil to both America and also to other oil companies. For example, when I visited Pennsylvania, the American state of Pennsylvania a few weeks ago, I still saw a few Lukoil gas stations. I wasn't sure whether they've still continued their relationship with their Russian parent or whether it's been cut off or reduced because of sanctions. And just to clarify, I didn't know if Lukoil and Gazprom are considered like pure competitors or whether they've done like any cooperative or collaborative activities with other companies like British BP or American Chevron or Exxon and so forth.
So it's a good observation. We have Lukoil gas stations in I don't think they are too much. They are like maybe 15 or 20. One. They are in New York, I guess. They have in New Jersey. Most of them are there. I don't think that there is here in this area. But all these facilities that under Lukoil brand are now on sale. They are these foreign assets that Lukoil said that they are divesting their international assets. They are just selling them. Not only in Europe, not only in Southeast Asia, but this includes this one as well. These fuel stations. And about the Rosneft and Gazpromneft and these companies that you mentioned, these refineries that refiners that are there? You mentioned that are there. What was the second part of your question?
Like Lukoil and Gazprom, do they cooperate or are they purely competitive, let's say, against BP or Exxon or outside companies?
Lukoil and Gazprom, they had before projects with BP. BP had this Sakhalin 1 and Sakhalin 2 project for I guess this was for gas exploration. With BP with Rosneft, they were doing this, and Gazpromneft. I don't recall if they had any projects with Western companies, but all of these projects are now on hold, so they are abandoned, and they are put on hold because of the sanctions. And after the war started, all these big oil majors, Western oil majors, they redrawn.
Yeah. Now, now to look forward. So, under the scenario that if Russia were the Russian Federation, if it actually were to fracture into its consolidation state, say if Putin ends up falling from power, again, who knows where it's going to be, but in the event that it does fracture into its constitutions, do you see much effort by these constitutions to engage countries like China, or just generally what would be your outlook, say, if it were to, say, break up its constitutions, how would the dynamic work? Would some of them potentially attempt to engage Europe, others, say, be more focused on exports to China? How do you see that scenario playing out?
So, Russian main supporter is China, and Russia is selling its energy products very easily to China. They are not concerned about sanctions. And this will continue. This is a traditional partnership, becoming a traditional partnership. After Chinese president and Putin, they declare their, how to say, 100-year-old partnership that will continue. So I don't think that that this will be disrupted in the near future. Yes. Yes. I don't think. I mean, China would be glad to have change, some kind of, because they don't like the war. For China, the war in Ukraine is just disrupting the European market and their exports to Europe. They are trying to export their electric vehicles, basically driving this wave of electrification, which is very important part of my reporting, because we have electrification of the automotive sector of the cars, and the cars then use less lubricants. And it means that all these companies that I'm writing about, they are going to either bust, they're going to be sold or go down, or they have to transform, and instead of lubricants, they have to produce, for example, coolants, because all of these cars, they need coolants for the cooling of the battery systems, as well as data centers. They also need such kind of products that that will help cooling technologies, development of cooling technologies. So yeah, China is back to your question. China is trying to to be, say, pragmatic and sell the products in Europe, sell its finished products in Europe, and doesn't like what's going on in Ukraine, but it's still using the situation with cheap oil prices and buying as much as possible from Russia.
Just like earlier, quickly, that's aiming at, let's say, would China then, if the Russian Federation were to fracture economically, so would you expect China to attempt bilateral negotiations with each of the consumer members on a...
I'm not a proponent of Russian, as you say, fracturing. I'm not a proponent of that. I don't think that Russia would fall into pieces and be divided between different types of states. But yeah, even if after the war, after we have some kind of peace deal, this business will continue. Business between Russia and China. It's a very strong bond there.
Thank you for your very interesting talk. I'm also a journalist, and I've covered sanctions. I haven't looked at energy and oil. I've looked at technology, and I've looked in particular at machine tools and microchips that come from the West and end up, despite sanctions, getting into Russia. And a lot of the time, the question that I get is, well, if these sanctions are being broken and Russia is finding ways to get around the sanctions, what's the point of the sanctions? And my answer is that the point of the sanctions is very narrow. It's to make it more difficult for Russia to wage war in Ukraine. So anything that makes it more expensive for Russia to wage war in Ukraine serves that goal by making it more expensive for them to procure the technology they need and so forth. So I wanted to ask, you were mentioning that a lot of lubricants and other oil products, downstream products, continue to seep into Europe and Eastern Europe. Is this the same as if the sanctions weren't there, or is there a massive cost to the Russian economy, despite the fact that they're finding ways to sell some things?
So is this the same? What do you mean?
I'm saying, is there a cost to are the sanctions in the energy area that you focus on imposing a cost on Russia, despite the fact that they are managing to sell something on the black market?
Oh yeah, they are actually imposing the big costs, because, as I mentioned, Lukoil was considered one of the biggest. It is actually the biggest supplier of lubricants in Russia, and they had this huge international LLK international lubricant arm of Lukoil, LLK International. They had very, how to say, ambitious goals, goal to go around, to expand globally, selling not only automotive products but marine oils, which are very important for the shipping industry as well. And they opened their offices in Singapore, I think they had also in Turkey as well, and in different European cities. They had their own distribution center in Rotterdam, and all this is now gone. So this is very costly, cost a lot, because their business is gone. The lubricant side business, they are just putting it away, and they are just focusing on the domestic market, which is smaller than comparing to the global.
So are the sanctions effective in the sense that they are decreasing Russia's revenue?
They are,
and the ability for them to fund the military-industrial complex.
Sanctions are affecting to a certain degree, not as much as we expect. And the aim is, just like in a war of attrition, we have economic war of attrition with Russia now. So the aim is, as I mentioned, to gradually damage the economy in Russia, and gradually, people to understand that it costs for their living standard, costs for their salaries, maybe not so distant future they won't be able to buy products, they won't be able to buy grocery stores, just like in the end of 80s, in the beginning of 90s, with the collapse of the Soviet Union. These are the trends that are happening right now. And if it's still going on, if it's continuing to go on, we might see the economic collapse very soon. And this is part because of the sanctions.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your remarks tonight. I want to actually add to Simon's question. So let's assume for the moment that Russian energy extraction revenues are zeroed out. So like whatever, $100 billion per annum. And the Russian military budget is roughly $250 million per year. So let's just assume that like Western sanctions are completely successful. I know that's not what's happening. Based on your understanding of energy politics in Russia, Igor Sechin, and whoever else has Vladimir Putin's ear in that sector, I mean, would that impact at all the calculus for continuing the war? Would it give the West any leverage? Would it give Ukraine any leverage in negotiations? I mean, presumably some, but I think there are a lot of people in the U.S. government right now who are trying to figure out ways to leverage Russia into a negotiated settlement, and energy is one of them. And it's a big question mark as to whether even maximum cost imposition would change the way Vladimir Putin thinks about prosecuting the war. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good observation. And I think that the Trump administration is much more positively towards Russian, towards what's going on in Russia, and towards Kremlin, and they want to to make some kind of settlement with Russia, with Putin, and part of these negotiations most likely is the energy sector as well. But as of now, we don't see any movement by the Russian side. They are still, trapped in this geopolitical, 19th century real power play. They want territories. Putin actually, he's in this mindset for a long period of time now, and I think that they will go to the end. So they will try to push further as possible, and to see if they can take over Ukraine, half Ukraine, or just this area that they are occupying. But yeah, these negotiations, I believe that energy is a big part of that, and we will just We don't know what's going on actually behind the closed doors, but we will see that something will be in the future.
So maybe a direct version is like, so no energy revenues, energy extraction revenues that go to the Russian budget. Would that decide to end the war unilaterally? Would both the energy sector prevail on the section say, I'm losing too much money? Are they so bought and controlled by Putin that they would have no persuasive effect?
Oh yeah, I think that if the energy is totally shut off and they stop getting money profits from that, they will definitely stop the war. But it's not the case because Siberia is in abundance with oil and other energy products. So this war can continue as long as Siberia is flush with with oil and other resources. So as I mentioned, it's a zero-sum game, but for Putin, zero-sum game.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up your observation that more effective sanctions could lead to the economic collapse of Russia. Since the war started, the Russian GDP is about 9% higher than 4 years ago. Ukrainian GDP is about 20% lower than it was 4 years ago. So the question I have is more effective sanctions on Russia, if assuming they can be accomplished, going to have more leverage on Russia, or is Russian bombing of Ukrainian energy, transportation sectors, infrastructure, going to put more pressure on Ukraine? Which of those two strategies is going to be more effective in getting one of the parties to cry uncle and call for an armistice?
Well, this is kind of a hypothetical question because I cannot say who if Russia will start bombing Ukraine further and further, and who will be who will prevail. That's kind of not. I don't think it's not thankful to ask, but basically I don't believe that the Russian economy's GDP is, as you mentioned, for how many percent? 6% higher than before the war started, because as we know, state statistics in Russia is totally under control of Kremlin, and they are just writing, they are just faking the numbers. So they will tell to the people, to the public, that we have GDP growth of such and such, but it's not the case. So their GDP growth is much lower. Maybe it's in the minus. Their stagnation is taking place now, last couple of years in Russia. So the economy is so weak that it might collapse soon, because they have this they have very lower and lower profits from selling oil.
With the new administration has pivoted towards selling arms to Europe, and then Europe in turn will give it to Ukraine, as opposed to previous administration directly either giving or selling it to Ukraine. So with that, at least in the next few years, doesn't look that there is a big incentive for U.S. to immediately stop the war. For economic reasons, because they are able to sell the arms to Europe at a profit, obviously.
Yeah. Do you want to ask that whether this?
Yeah. So there is no. I see there is no end in sight. In other words, it will continue for a long, long time to come.
Yeah, there is no end in sight. So basically, Russia is what is Russia doing? Russia is either selling their crude oil around the globe with discounted price, or trying to use these back channels to sell their products produced in Russian refineries, like base oils and these downstream sector products, through back channels in Europe and via Turkey, Egypt, Emirates. So that's the game. They are keep getting profits by gaming the system, by gaming, and this would go on as long as it's not, Europe doesn't enforce such kind of regulations like in like in UK, to anti-dumping policies, because they are flooding the market with cheap products, and these products are made in Russia, basically.
No, but the question is, how long can Ukrainian force hold it?
Mm-hmm.
Like this can go on, then suddenly Ukraine can collapse too, right? If you think about it.
I don't think that Ukraine will collapse because they are backed by Europe. They are backed by European Union. They have this agreement to finance in next 2 years. What was the number? $90 billion for next 2 years to be afloat the government and industry there in the whole country. But so we have 2 years for Ukraine. But how many we have for Russia? Maybe Russian economy will collapse in 3 months or in 6 months.
That's the name of the game. Right?
Yeah, that's the name. So the name of the game is war, economic war of attrition. That's kind of like my understanding of these sanctions. And if the sanctions or on in Europe, because Europe is divided between, I'm not divided, but you have different jurisdictions, and some are more some are more aware about the Russian influence and Russian products coming into the markets, and some are not so aware, like Slovakia or Hungary. They don't care because they kind of they are against the European policy of sanctions against Russia. And some countries like UK, they have their regulations already put in place against such products coming. So if all of these countries, European countries, go together and impose such kind of restrictions on a national level, it means that this will stop one more channel for Putin to sell these products in the West.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Any more questions? Thank you.